Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Philip K. Dick's The Crawlers, which was published in 1954. It's a very creepy story, and it's about this strange mutation that happens in this town in the Midwest. These pools start to form, and these creatures that are, I guess they're we're not even really sure what exactly they are. It's like they might be an offshoot of human beings, but they've obviously mutated into these sort of strange centipede-like things with this almost like a gelatinous membrane-like exterior to them, and they become like a very sort of morbid fascination for a lot of teenagers, a lot of kids who pass by them and try to play with them. But basically, it's an infestation that happens in this town. And the beginning of the story is told from one of the crawlers' perspectives. And they're not, obviously, it reveals that they're not just these dumb creatures, but they're highly, sentient, they're intelligent, they're able to form colonies. And their faces even have somewhat human-like configurations. They have black eyes. Typical kind of monster that you would imagine, Bela Lugosi sort of story. And towards the end, the government in the story decides to ship all these creatures off to an island where they can form colonies somewhere else, where they're no longer an infestation, they're no longer a nuisance in this town. And I would say that the first time that I read through it, I thought, okay, it's just kind of, it would be like the equivalent of clickbait. It's just kind of, sensational, it's creepy, whatever. But then the second time I read it, I realized that he was able to capture something, like a certain feeling that it's almost like as if he read my mind. Because I remember as I was growing up, I would always have this way of kind of glorifying and beautifying a lot of the mystery about the past of what created our civilization. And I would love looking at cave paintings and even the stuff that was not really that plausible. I mean, they could mention things like mermaids and either the cave paintings would be of these giants communicating with tribes. But then when I would look into the future, when I would try to speculate about the future, there was always this sense of gloom and dread about it. Like the unknown regarding the past, even if it was equally mysterious, was somehow more comforting to me. It was almost like you were kind of like how a religious person feels when he looks back on the creation of the earth in 6 days, right? There's always a sense that there was something loving, there was something that almost feels warmer, that feels more familiar to you. And particularly when I look at stories about aliens helping human beings form civilization, I always used to be into that. But then when I think about the future, it was almost like going into a black hole. Even positive change was scary to me. Like when I just think about civilization as a whole, because it was there was almost like a feeling of taking your hands off the steering wheel and just letting something kind of go in a way that you feel like you don't have as much control over, you don't expect. And so I try to imagine, well, what would they look like thousands of years from now? It would always be very daunting, and I think that story plays on that feeling for me. And I think these creatures, they also remind me of these things that as a child, I had an active imagination. I'd make up things, and there was a word that we'd always used to joke about called gribbles that I made up as a kid. About these things I have nightmares about, these kind of rubbery, slimy creatures in the ocean. And so what he was describing were kind of like that. So it would literally kind of make my skin crawl when I would read it. So I think that, coupled with this sort of very dire prediction about the future, was actually, I would say, made it one of his particularly powerful stories. And I would highly recommend it. And right now I would say I'm still maybe admittedly struggling to find what exactly the the social message or the political message in it is, like, is it might be a little easier to find that in other stories, but it's something I'd continue to dig for. But I would say definitely, I think from a purely from a craftsman point of view, from the ability to craft a whole new world, something that people would find compelling. It's something that's very strong.